I never thought my own son would look me in the eyes and see nothing but dollar signs. But that's exactly what happened the night they tried to kill me. My son David and his wife Vanessa didn't just betray me, they pushed me into the ocean, believing the waves would silence me forever. And all of it, just so they could snatch away the $3 billion my late husband left behind. Before I tell you how I survived and turned the tables, let me ask you something. If you believe that justice should always win over greed, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. It helps us keep telling stories like this. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to know. The night it happened still feels like a fever dream. David had called me after my hip replacement surgery, saying he wanted to celebrate my recovery with a quiet evening on the yacht. Just family, he said, with that soft voice that reminded me of when he was little, running barefoot in the garden. I wanted to believe him. Mothers do that, we cling to the fragments of innocence we once knew, even when the truth is staring us down. At first, it all seemed so normal. Champagne glasses, the ocean breeze, the faint hum of the generator below deck. Vanessa was dressed elegantly, a little too formal for what was supposed to be a family dinner. And then David leaned forward, smile frozen, and asked about my will. It wasn't curiosity in his voice, it was calculation. I felt the air shift. I should have known then. Minutes later, Vanessa picked up her phone, pretending to check messages, but I noticed the lens glinting as she angled it toward me. Recording me. They had been doing this for months, I later discovered, setting me up, twisting small moments into evidence that my memory was fading. I laughed about misplacing my reading glasses once, and suddenly it was a symptom of dementia. I called a friend by her maiden name, and they whispered behind my back about early Alzheimer's. That night, they cornered me. David slid a stack of papers across the polished mahogany table, documents transferring control of my estate to him. It's just a precaution, Mom, he said, tone syrupy sweet, so you don't have to worry about all that stress anymore. Vanessa added, we're just looking out for you. Looking out for me? No. They were circling me like sharks. I pushed the papers back. My hands shook, not from weakness, but from anger. I'm not signing, I told them. Not tonight, not ever. That's when Vanessa's mask slipped. Her smile turned sharp, eyes cold. She stood, walked around the table, and whispered in my ear, then you're not needed anymore. Before I could react, her hands shoved hard against my back, and I was falling into black water, salt burning my throat, waves swallowing me whole. I don't remember hitting the surface. I don't remember screaming. I only remember the cold, the crushing dark, and the sound of David's voice above me, already on the phone, arranging the paperwork that would declare me legally incompetent and unfit to manage my finances. They were erasing me in real time. But fate, or maybe something stronger, had other plans. A rough, calloused hand grabbed my arm and hauled me into a small fishing boat. His name was Jake Morrison, a fisherman with kind eyes and the quiet strength of a man who's seen too much ocean to be surprised by anything. He wrapped me in his coat, gave me water, and when I begged him not to tell anyone I was alive, not yet, he nodded without asking why. Sometimes trust is born in silence. I told no one else. Not the police, not my lawyers, not even my oldest friends. If David and Vanessa believed I was dead, I could move in the shadows, watching, listening, gathering the truth. Because deep down I knew this wasn't just about two greedy children. This was bigger. I had felt it for months, the forged documents I almost signed by mistake, the sudden confusion after taking pills I swore looked different than usual, the whispers I wasn't meant to hear. And then there was the baby. Yes, a baby. Vanessa had paraded him around weeks before, calling him their miracle. But I noticed the dates didn't add up, and the story about his birth sounded rehearsed. Something was wrong. And as I would learn, that child was the key to uncovering a criminal network so vast it spanned multiple states, dozens of families, and more than $200 million in stolen inheritances. But in that moment, dripping wet on Jake's boat, I wasn't thinking about networks or conspiracies. I was thinking about survival. About betrayal. About how the people I had given everything to, the people who were supposed to carry my name forward, had tried to erase me. And I made myself a promise: if I lived, I would not only take back what they stole, but I would make sure the world knew the truth. For the first few days, I hid in Jake's spare room above his boat shed, wrapped in blankets that smelled faintly of salt and cedar. He didn't ask questions, just made sure I had hot soup, dry clothes, and a safe place to breathe. I couldn't risk being seen. My face had been splashed across headlines already: tragic drowning of widow Margaret Harrison, my son's crocodile tears on full display for the cameras. Watching that footage on Jake's little TV, I saw him hold Vanessa's hand, saw her faint grief, and heard David say words that almost made me vomit: she lived a full life. We'll honor her memory by carrying her legacy forward. Carrying my legacy forward? No. They were dragging it into the mud. But I couldn't act rashly. If I ran straight to the police, what proof did I have? A drenched nightgown and my word against theirs. Worse, what if they had already planted evidence to discredit me? The thought gnawed at me. I knew I needed allies, but the right ones. People who would believe me, who wouldn't run straight to David the moment they saw me. That's when I thought of Mrs. Chin. She'd been with me for 20 years, first as a housekeeper, then as something closer to a sister. When my husband died, she was the one who made sure I ate, who quietly left tea at my bedside when grief hollowed me out. If there was anyone I could trust, it was her. I slipped into the city at dawn, a scarf pulled low, a taxi driver who didn't ask questions. I knocked on her door, and when she opened it, her eyes went wide. She reached out like she was touching a ghost. "Madam, they said you were gone." I gripped her hands. "Not gone. Not yet. But we can't tell anyone. Not until we know the truth." Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she nodded fiercely. Mrs. Chin had seen enough in her life to understand secrets could be safer than honesty. She pulled me inside, made tea, and listened as I told her everything. The yacht. The shove. Jake's rescue. The will. The baby. When I finished, her face was pale but determined. "I knew something was wrong," she whispered. "The pills, remember? I gave them to you, but they weren't the ones Dr. Wallace prescribed. Vanessa switched them. I told myself it was a mistake, but now I see." Her words sent a chill down my spine. I hadn't imagined it. They were poisoning me slowly, preparing the stage for my decline. We needed more than suspicion. We needed proof. That's when Mrs. Chin mentioned someone she knew, a man named Danny Crawford. On paper, he was a private investigator. In reality, he was something else entirely, though I wouldn't learn that until much later. Danny looked nothing like the detectives in movies. He was quiet, with sandy hair and kind but watchful eyes. When Mrs. Chin introduced us in the back room of a tea shop, I studied him carefully. Could I trust him? Could I trust anyone? "I know what you're risking by meeting me," I said, my voice low. "But my son and his wife tried to kill me. And I think it's bigger than just them." Danny didn't flinch. He pulled out a notebook, clicked his pen, and said, "Start from the beginning." So I did. I told him about the will, the staged recordings, the shove, the pills. He listened without interrupting, except to ask precise questions. Dates. Names. Where the medicine came from. What time David called me that night. His calm steadied me. When I finished, he leaned back and tapped his pen against the notebook. "Mrs. Harrison. I believe you. And you're right. This is bigger." He explained something that made my stomach twist. Over the past 2 years, there had been dozens of cases, wealthy elders dying under mysterious circumstances, always with heirs stepping in quickly to claim estates. The pattern was too clean, too rehearsed. Someone was orchestrating it. My mind went straight to Miranda Torres. She had been my husband's attorney, and though I'd never liked her, too polished, too eager, I'd kept her close out of loyalty to my husband's memory. She'd been at my house constantly after his passing, pushing documents in front of me, urging me to make simple changes to the trust. I'd always hesitated, but now I wondered, had she been working with David and Vanessa all along? The more Danny and I dug, the more threads unraveled. We discovered shell companies connected to Miranda's law firm, all tied to estates that had shifted hands suspiciously fast after the deaths of their owners. We found whisper trails leading to something called Whitmore Reproductive Services, a fertility clinic with sealed records and a strange connection to surrogate mothers. That's when the baby came back into focus. Vanessa's so-called miracle child. Danny found a lead, a young girl named Sarah Collins. She was only 17 when she died under circumstances that were too neat, too tidy. She had been a surrogate. Her name was buried under hospital records no one was supposed to see. I remember staring at the photo Danny slid across the table. Sarah's face was round, her smile shy. She could have been anyone's daughter, anyone's sister. And she was gone, her body discarded so my daughter-in-law could parade a baby as proof of their perfect little family. My stomach turned. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every family they had destroyed, every elder they had erased, every young woman they had used. Mrs. Harrison, Danny said gently, this is dangerous. If we go further, there's no turning back. These people don't just ruin reputations, they make people disappear. I looked him in the eyes and said the words I'd been carrying since the night of the yacht, they already tried to make me disappear. I won't hide anymore. Mrs. Chen reached for my hand, squeezing tightly. In that small room, 3 of us sat together, an old widow, a loyal friend, and a quiet investigator, and a plan began to form. A plan not just to survive, but to fight back. And as I would soon learn, Danny Crawford wasn't just a private investigator. He was FBI. Undercover. And I had just stepped into a war far bigger than I ever imagined. Danny didn't tell me right away that he was FBI. He kept that close to his chest, letting me believe he was just a private investigator with unusual resources. But as we dug deeper, the scale of what we uncovered made it clear this wasn't the work of a man with only a notepad and a magnifying glass. He had contacts inside hospitals, records that should have been sealed, surveillance photos of people who thought they were invisible. One night, as we sat around Mrs. Chen's kitchen table, papers spread across the surface, I asked him directly, Danny, who are you really? He paused, his eyes flicking to Mrs. Chen, then back to me. Finally, he exhaled and said, I'm FBI. I was placed on this case months ago, investigating Miranda Torres and her network. Your son and his wife, they're just one piece of the machine. My breath caught. FBI. It explained so much, the access, the quiet confidence. But it also meant my life was now tangled in something federal, dangerous, and much bigger than my own family. Danny leaned forward, his voice steady. Mrs. Harrison, your survival changes everything. Until now, we've had suspicion, but no living witness. If you're willing, you could be the key to dismantling this entire operation. The words weighed heavy. I thought of David as a little boy, clinging to my hand on his first day of school. Of Vanessa, the girl I once tried to welcome into the family despite her coldness. They weren't just greedy children, they had become weapons in someone else's hands. And if I stepped forward, I wasn't just saving myself. I was saving countless others who might be next. I looked at Danny, then at Mrs. Chen. I'll do it, I whispered. But we have to be smart. They think I'm dead. Let's use that. That night marked the beginning of our secret war. We followed the money first. Danny showed me charts of estates, millions shifting overnight from elderly parents to heirs who'd been coached, manipulated, or outright coerced. The attorney at the center of nearly every transaction? Miranda Torres. She wasn't just drafting documents. She was building a pipeline. A quiet machine that turned the deaths of the old into the fortunes of the young. But there was something darker beneath the surface. The fertility clinic. Whitmore Reproductive Services. Its name appeared in files tied to multiple heirs, all of whom suddenly produced miracle children around the time of contested wills. It was a pattern. A grotesque one. Danny uncovered testimonies from women who had worked as surrogates. Many had been vulnerable, teenagers, immigrants, girls with no one to defend them. They were recruited, paid little, and silenced. Some, like Sarah Collins, never came home. I couldn't stop staring at Sarah's photo. She looked so much like my granddaughter might have looked, if I'd ever been blessed with one. A child stolen from her future so Vanessa could hold a baby in front of the cameras and cement her place as the devoted young mother carrying on the Harrison name. It was monstrous. And it wasn't just my family. There were 37 confirmed cases. 37 families broken apart. Over $200 million siphoned through shell accounts, buried under legal contracts written in ink that carried death beneath its letters. We began gathering evidence quietly. Mrs. Chin proved invaluable, slipping into the house while David and Vanessa were away, retrieving pills, recording devices, documents. Each time she returned, she handed Danny small but critical pieces of the puzzle. A vial of altered medication. A flash drive full of emails between David and Miranda. A signed document Vanessa had backdated. Every item tightened the noose. But what cut the deepest wasn't the legal papers or the money trails. It was the recordings. Danny obtained wiretaps, conversations between Miranda and her clients. I listened to one late at night, sitting with headphones in Jake's shed. Miranda's voice, smooth and assured, "Parents live too long these days. Sentimentality won't pay the bills. What you need is closure, and I can provide it." Then David's voice, hesitant but eager, "And once she's gone, everything's mine? There won't be any complications?" I pulled the headphones off, my stomach heaving. My son. My little boy. Talking about me like a financial hurdle. I wept that night, but by morning the tears had dried into something else, resolve. If they wanted me erased, I would make sure the world knew exactly who they were. Danny, Mrs. Chen, and I formed a plan. I would remain dead a little longer, letting David and Vanessa grow bolder, more careless. They were already preparing a lavish press event to announce their new foundation, a charity that was nothing more than a laundering front for Miranda's network. It would be their undoing. In the meantime, Danny began working with federal prosecutors, feeding them the evidence piece by piece. He warned me it would take time, the FBI had to be thorough. One mistake and the entire network could slip through the cracks. But I wasn't afraid of patience anymore. I had already stared death in the face. I spent quiet hours rocking baby Robert, Sarah's baby, in my arms. Vanessa had paraded him like a trophy, but in those still moments, I saw only innocence. His tiny hand curled around my finger, his breath soft against my chest. He didn't know the darkness that had brought him into the world. He didn't know the mother he would never meet. I whispered to him, "You're safe now. I promise you'll grow up with love, not greed." But even as I made that promise, I knew the storm was coming. The truth couldn't stay hidden forever. And when it broke, it would shatter my family and expose secrets that stretched far beyond my own home. The weeks that followed felt like living inside a chess game where every move had to be calculated with precision. Danny worked day and night, piecing together the final threads of evidence. Mrs. Chin kept her quiet watch, slipping in and out of places where no one suspected her. And I waited. Hidden, silent, watching from the shadows of my own life. It was almost unbearable, knowing my son walked the world freely, planning his next steps, while I was reduced to a ghost. But Danny promised me that patience would win. "We only get one chance," he reminded me. "When we pull the trigger, everything has to fall." The FBI had decided on a sting. David and Vanessa were preparing to launch their so-called Harrison Foundation, a charity meant to polish their public image while funneling laundered estate money through offshore accounts. Miranda Torres herself would be there, cutting the ribbon, flashing her perfect lawyer's smile for the cameras. It was the perfect stage. And it was where I would return from the dead. Danny fitted me with a discreet recorder. "Your son trusts Miranda," he explained. "She'll talk freely with him. But what we need is her unguarded arrogance. She likes to boast when she thinks she's in control. If you can get her to gloat, it'll be the nail in her coffin." The plan terrified me, but I agreed. I had lived too long in silence. It was time to be loud. The day of the event, I arrived hidden in the back of a surveillance van, dressed simply, hair pulled back, no makeup. Just Margaret. Not the socialite widow, not the victim, not the ghost. Just me. Through the tinted glass, I watched the red carpet laid out in front of the grand ballroom. Photographers swarmed as David and Vanessa stepped out of a sleek black car, smiling like royalty. Vanessa cradled baby Robert, my Robert now, in her arms, presenting him as proof of their bright new legacy. Miranda followed close behind, draped in elegance, her confidence radiating. She shook hands, posed, whispered instructions into Vanessa's ear. I felt bile rise in my throat. When the speeches began, the FBI signaled. It was time. I walked into the ballroom quietly, unnoticed at first, my heels clicking softly against marble. Vanessa was mid-sentence at the podium, thanking our dear late matriarch, Margaret Harrison, whose generosity we honor today. Her words faltered when she saw me. The microphone squealed as her hand trembled. Gasps rippled through the audience. David froze, his glass of champagne halfway to his lips, eyes wide with something between horror and rage. And Miranda. Miranda's composure cracked for just a second. Then she smiled, smooth as ever. "Margaret," she said, her voice carrying like silk over the room, "what an unexpected surprise." I stood tall. Not as surprised as I was when my own son tried to kill me. The crowd erupted, journalists shouting, cameras flashing, whispers flying like sparks in a storm. David's face turned pale, then flushed red. "Mother, you're confused. You don't know what you're saying." But Vanessa's mask had already slipped. She clutched Robert tighter, her eyes darting to Miranda, waiting for instruction. I turned to Miranda. "Why don't you tell them, Ms. Torres? Tell them how many families you've destroyed. How many children you've stolen. Or shall I play it for them?" I reached into my bag and pulled out a small speaker Danny had given me. I pressed a button, and Miranda's own voice filled the ballroom. "Parents live too long these days. Sentimentality won't pay the bills. What you need is closure, and I can provide it." The effect was instantaneous. The room gasped. Reporters surged forward. Miranda's face drained of color as she realized the walls were closing in. David grabbed my arm suddenly, his voice a hiss. "Why couldn't you just die?" The venom in his words echoed through the microphones. The world heard him, clear, unfiltered, undeniable. That was the final crack. The FBI agents, who had been mingling in disguise among the crowd, stepped forward. Badges flashed. Commands shouted. In seconds, Miranda, David, and Vanessa were surrounded. Vanessa shrieked, clinging to Robert until an agent carefully took the child from her arms. David struggled, spitting accusations at me, at everyone, before being shoved into handcuffs. Miranda, however, did not struggle. She simply straightened her jacket, smirked, and whispered as the agents led her away, "You think this ends with me? There are others." But the cameras had caught everything. Her voice, David's confession, Vanessa's silence. The empire she had built was crumbling in real time, broadcast to the world. I stood there trembling, the weight of years pressing down on me, but also lifting. I had survived. I had fought back. And for the first time in months, I wasn't a ghost. Reporters swarmed me, their questions flying faster than I could hear. But I didn't answer them. I only looked at baby Robert in the agent's arms, reaching for me with his tiny fingers. I took him gently, pressing my cheek against his soft hair, and whispered, "We're free now. Truly free." That night, when the news aired, the headline read, "Wealthy Widow Returns from the Dead, Exposes National Estate Murder Scheme." But for me, it wasn't about headlines. It was about justice. It was about Sarah. It was about every parent who deserved love, not betrayal. The weeks after the sting blurred together in a haze of headlines, subpoenas, and depositions. My name filled the news cycle. Reporters dissected every detail of my survival, every whisper of Miranda's empire, every shocking betrayal by my own son. Strangers called me brave, strong, resilient. But in the quiet of night, when the cameras were gone, I felt only tired. The FBI kept me close as the investigation spread. What we had uncovered was only the tip of the iceberg. Files seized from Miranda's office revealed years of orchestrated accidents, sudden deaths of wealthy parents, and suspiciously convenient inheritances. Dozens of families had fallen victim to her network. The numbers were staggering: more than 37 confirmed cases, over $200 million redirected into shell companies, offshore trusts, and blood-stained fortunes. And at the center of it, Miranda Torres, now stripped of her title, her law license, and her armor of respectability. She faced a mountain of charges: conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, fraud, human trafficking, and more. The prosecution called her the architect of modern parricide. But Miranda never flinched. In court, she sat tall, lips painted, eyes sharp, as though she still believed she could charm her way out. When the recordings played, her voice mocking families, promising closure for greedy heirs, her smile only hardened. And when my testimony was called, she looked straight at me, unblinking, daring me to break. I did not break. I told the jury everything. The night on the yacht. The betrayal. The fear. The voices I heard in my son's room as Miranda promised him freedom from the burden of a living mother. I spoke with a trembling voice, but I spoke. And when I finished, I glanced at the jurors and saw the disgust etched on their faces. After weeks of evidence and testimony, the verdict came. Guilty. On every count. Miranda Torres was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Her empire was shattered, her name forever branded with the crime she had built. David and Vanessa's trial was harder for me. They were my blood. My son, my daughter-in-law, the ones who should have carried my legacy forward. Instead, they stood accused of attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud. David refused to look at me in court. He kept his head down, his expression twisted with a mixture of rage and shame. When he finally spoke, it wasn't to apologize. It was to blame. He claimed Miranda manipulated him, that Vanessa pushed him, that I had abandoned him emotionally years ago. His words cut deeper than any knife. Vanessa, on the other hand, wept. She painted herself as a victim, pressured by David, seduced by Miranda's promises. But her tears didn't move the jury. Not after the recordings, not after the evidence, not after her silence the night she held Robert while David tried to end me. The sentences were clear. David, 25 years without parole. Vanessa, 20 years. Both would serve most of their adult lives behind bars. When the judge asked if I wanted to make a statement, I rose slowly, my heart pounding. I looked at my son, the boy I had once rocked to sleep, the man who had tried to throw me away, and I said, "You wanted my house, my wealth, my life. But those things were never yours to take. What you threw away wasn't money. It was family. It was love. And that is the one fortune you will never find again." My voice cracked, but I didn't cry. I couldn't. My tears had dried long before. After the verdicts, the press hounded me for weeks. They wanted anger, they wanted revenge, they wanted a soundbite of triumph. But all I felt was grief. Not for Miranda, she had chosen her path. Not even for Vanessa. But for David. For the son I lost long before the yacht, long before the handcuffs. I grieved the child I had raised, the man he could have been, and the love that had been poisoned beyond repair. In the midst of all this, baby Robert became my light. The court awarded me custody after Vanessa's conviction, and I made a choice that would define the rest of my days. I renamed him Robert Sarah Harrison, after the surrogate mother, Sarah Collins, whose life had been stolen by Miranda's schemes. I wanted her memory to live on, not erased, not forgotten. Holding Robert each night, I felt a new sense of purpose. His tiny hands wrapped around my finger, his eyes searching for comfort, for safety, for a mother. I vowed then and there that he would never feel the abandonment, the betrayal, the cruelty that had defined so much of my own journey. He would grow up knowing love, not greed. Family, not betrayal. Mrs. Chen and Jake became constants in our lives, helping me raise Robert, creating a home filled with warmth instead of secrets. Danny, though often pulled back into his FBI work, stayed in touch, checking in to ensure we were safe. Slowly, what had been broken began to knit together into something new. Not the family I had lost, but a chosen family. One built not on blood, but on trust. And as I rocked Robert to sleep one quiet evening, I realized something. Justice had been served. Miranda would never harm another family. David and Vanessa would pay for their crimes. But justice wasn't about punishment alone. It was about reclaiming what was taken. It was about healing. It was about building a future that couldn't be poisoned by the past. For me, that future was Robert. His laughter, his first steps, his little voice learning to say grandma. That was my true legacy. Not wealth. Not estates. Not headlines. Love. That was all that mattered. As the seasons turned and the chaos of courtrooms and headlines faded into memory, I found myself learning to live again. The house, once filled with shadows of betrayal, began to echo with the laughter of a child. Robert grew quickly, his little feet pattering across the wooden floors, his smile chasing away the darkness that had once seemed permanent. There were still nights when the weight of everything pressed down on me. I would wake from dreams of drowning, from echoes of David's voice, from Miranda's cold eyes. But then I would hear Robert stir in the next room, and I would remember why I had fought so hard to survive. Not for the money. Not for revenge. But for him, for the chance to create a world where love outweighed cruelty, where family meant safety, not danger. I often thought about Sarah Collins, the young woman whose life was stolen so cruelly by Miranda's schemes. I carried her memory with me each day, whispering her name when I rocked Robert to sleep. He would never know her arms, her smile, her voice. But he would know her love, through me. Naming him Robert Sarah was my way of promising her that her sacrifice would not be forgotten. Mrs. Chen became his honorary grandmother, fussing over him with the same tender care she had once shown me. Jake, though a rough young man, softened whenever Robert reached for him. And Danny, still working deep inside the FBI, called every few weeks just to check in. Together, we became something unexpected. Not perfect. Not traditional. But real. A family chosen not by blood, but by loyalty, kindness, and the scars we had survived together. Sometimes, neighbors whispered about my son, about the scandal, about the trials. They wondered how I could go on after such betrayal. The truth was simple, I had no choice. If I let grief consume me, then Miranda and David would win even from behind bars. They had taken enough. They would not take my future, too. Forgiveness, though, was harder. People asked if I forgave David. The answer was complicated. I could not forgive the act, the attempt to end my life, the greed that blinded him, the cruelty he showed. But somewhere deep inside, I still loved the child I once held in my arms. The boy who used to run to me with scraped knees, who once whispered, "I love you, Mom," without hesitation. That boy was gone, consumed by ambition and poisoned by Miranda's promises. And yet, a piece of me mourned him still. Perhaps I always would. Vanessa faded from my thoughts more easily. Her tears in court had felt hollow, her excuses thin. But when Robert laughed, when his eyes lit up, I couldn't help but wonder if he had her smile, her spark. In him, I saw pieces of all the broken paths that led here. And instead of bitterness, I chose to see hope. He was innocent. He was the proof that love could outlast betrayal. On quiet mornings, when Robert curled up in my lap and the sun painted the sky pink, I realized something important. Wealth had once defined my family, and it had nearly destroyed us. But it was love, not money, that had saved me. Love from strangers who became allies, from friends who became family, from a child who gave me a second chance at motherhood. And perhaps that is the lesson I hope to leave with you. Family is not always blood. Sometimes, it is the people who choose to stand by you when the world falls apart. Sometimes, it is the ones who pick you up when those you trusted most push you down. I survived betrayal, greed, and nearly death itself. But I also discovered something greater: resilience, truth, and a love stronger than bloodlines. My story is not just about loss. It is about what comes after. Healing. Rebuilding. Choosing to live with purpose again. Now, I want to turn to you. What would you do if you were in my place? Could you forgive a child who betrayed you so deeply? Or would you close the door forever? Have you, or someone you love, ever faced something similar, being mistreated, cast aside, or even betrayed by your own family? Your voice matters. Sharing your story could help someone else who feels alone. And finally, I'd love to know, which story should we explore next? There are so many untold stories of resilience, betrayal, and survival waiting to be heard. Please, take a moment to like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Our community is stronger when we share not just stories, but ourselves. Because in the end, that's what binds us, not wealth, not status, not even blood. But the simple truth that we survive, we heal, and we carry on together.